Everybody, welcome back to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. And we are continuing the Sammy Hagar deep dive through all of the Red Rockers solo albums. And we have arrived at his first album of the 1980s and his last album for Capitol Records, which is an interesting period. So we're talking about 1980s
Oop.
Danger Zone. Pretty typical. He's put him in red, take a picture.
Yeah.
That's about what they did back then. And this was his band at the time. And yeah, so it's interesting because like his Capitol catalog spanned the 70s. You think of his Geffen years as the 80s, but this is the one album from the 80s that's still on Capitol. By the way, my co-host, you will recognize, of course, is Grant Arthur, Grant's Rock Warehouse and the Contrarians. Welcome, sir.
Tim, nice to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for
Appreciate it.
coming on and talking about this album. And we were just talking. You saw Sammy in concert a year prior to this on the Street
hmm
Machine tour, and that we first talked about that way back, and that's how the April Wine deep dive got started on your channel.
Yeah, because Sammy was, April Wine opened for, it was a Scorp. Well, wait a minute. I keep getting that all confused.
It would have been Scorpions
It
headlining, I think.
was, no, it was
But no,
April Wine, then the Scorpions, and then Sammy
and
Hagar.
then Sammy Hagar headlining. Okay,
The ticket was $5.
that is crazy. I can't even imagine. You couldn't get a sticker at a merch booth for $5 now.
No, but being a kid, that was like that was like my second concert, just sitting there watching everything, Sammy Hagar is one of those artists that just got burned into my DNA, because you're so impressionable. And it was such a great concert. And of course, we know Sammy's a great performer and a solid catalog. And when I think of Sammy Hagar, I think he's the hardest working musician in the business. I mean,
Yeah,
can't
I
stop.
agree. Guy takes an awful lot of crap, even from people he's worked with, like Van
hmm
Halen. And yeah, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the final album of his Capitol contract, which would have been his fifth album, I guess. Yes, his
Yeah,
9
it's
to 10
fifth.
scale, the Red Album, Musical Chairs, Street Machine, and now Danger Zone. Um, so what is? I guess I'll start by saying, what is your history with this album, Grant?
Well, I was taking everything in pretty much when I was like 13. So, as soon as I saw Sammy, I don't think I had the Street Machine album. I picked up right after I saw him because I was so taken with the whole concert. Great band, Chuck Ruff, Bill Church. I think it was Chuck was playing drums then.
Yeah, Chuck Ruff was playing drums with him at this point. He'd replaced uh, Denny Carmassi, and David Lauser didn't join until the next year.
But Gary Phil, great guitar player. They had what I remember when I was a kid, they were such a great band. So, I ended up getting Street Machine and then, this came out afterwards. So I ended up getting that. So I just kind of followed along since I was a kid. So been a
So I'm
long
curious,
time.
what version of that CD do you have? Because
This
this is
is
something we talk
this
about.
is the Rock Candy CD.
Okay, okay. I thought you might have had the original Capitol one because I know you've got some of those old.
Well, well, some of these came out on Capitol. This came out on I think this came out on One Way.
It
And
did.
then
It also this version I have
BGO,
is on BGO from the
that's
UK, but it did. Danger Zone did come out on Capitol. I don't have the Capitol CD, but it is out there.
yeah, I've never seen it.
Very hard to find. I mean, so yeah, so along the same lines, I've got the cassette here, the US cassette, and of course this.
Of course, you've got the
Of
eight
course, I've
track.
got that right. Um, so my history with this is a little bit fragmented because I got into Sammy later. Specifically, would have been like 1988. I explain all of that in Red on Black, Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar. I'll talk more about that later. But I discovered a mixed tape, which is one of those, I call them truck stop tapes that came out. It was called Red Hot, and it had it was live, bunch of live stuff. And from this album, the only thing that I remember hearing was 20th Century Man. But then I ended up getting a couple of more truck stop tapes cruising and boozing and turn up the music, which weren't actual albums. They were just cheap. They throw the label would throw them out there. And from those, I remember hearing Love or Money, uh, the Iceman, Bad Reputation, and Run for Your Life. So the first thing I found of this was the vinyl. So there, let's see, one, two, three, four. There were five. I guess half of this album I'd heard, half of it I hadn't. And that just speaks to like how scarce, how hard it was to find Sammy's early stuff, the Capitol stuff specifically, pre-internet. So I guess we'll get into the track by
Well,
track.
I'm like looking at, I'm just to jump off what you just said, like a lot of those, like 9 on a 10 scale, Sammy Hagar, musical chairs, I know did get a Japanese release on Capitol and it did get a domestic release. In
Yeah,
fact, musical chairs came out at the same time roughly when Street Machine came out. Um,
yeah.
but
The
you know
only,
what? Oh, there goes the balloons. Well, I guess it's appropriate.
yeah,
It's just funny for such an artist. I know I'm on a tangent already, but it's something valid. His career really took off with those Geffen years.
oh
And
yeah,
you would
yeah,
have thought that Capitol Records would have celebrated an artist of this stature more than they did. And you would have thought that they would pushed all these Sammy Hagar albums out as reissues. But really, it's a catalog that is really celebrated. Everybody should check these great records out, but you just can't find them. I don't
yeah.
even know
The
if you can stream them, but they're hard. You really have to, if you go and search, you go on Discogs and look, because most of this stuff's out of print. Maybe it's in print in Japan, but it's expensive.
Yeah, yeah,
CDs or
exactly.
physical media is not cheap.
Exactly. And that's one of the points I tried to make with how hard it was to complete the collection when I first got into his solo stuff in the end of the 80s, because it was I had a hard time finding Y&T stuff, but I love them, but that's an obscure band.
Mhm.
Sammy Hagar was at the time was the singer for one of the biggest rock bands in the world, and the way I described it, his early stuff was practically invisible. You couldn't find it anywhere, and then it never made any sense to me. But yeah, and the thing about when you get to Street Machine and Danger Zone, uh, those are the best of his Capitol studio albums, because the first three, and I talked about this in the previous deep dives, are really schizophrenic. Like they're all over the place stylistically. The label did not have a clue how to promote an artist like Sammy. Because first of all, they started out making him do a bunch of cover songs. They had him covering Van Morrison and Donovan, and none of it made any sense. And it's a shame. I mentioned this in another deep dive. There you go. It's a
There's this is the
shame.
cap. This is the Capitol, the original Capitol
Oh,
CD.
oh, that is
And
so
the
cool.
spine, there it is. And then
I have the BGO version of it, but man, yeah,
yeah,
I'd love to
this is
find those.
this is music, the music on CD version. So
Okay,
this
okay.
original, this just came out like a year, maybe a year and a half ago on music on CD. So this is back in print. Just to
So
let anyone know.
so my history with getting them on CD, BGO, Beat Goes On Records, is from the UK. And that's how I've got 9 out of 10 scale, Red, the self-titled, Musical Chairs, Street Machine, this one, Danger Zone, and also Loud and Clear, which was the UK version of All Night Long. Um, All Night Long and Live 1980, I've got one way versions of. So those are US
Yeah.
reissues. The only one of his catalog that I've actually got an original Capitol CD of is Rematch, which is the best of that Capitol put out in 82. They put it out on CD in 87 with some extra songs, and they called it Rematch and More. But it's the same, it's the same comp. So yeah, and even now, if you go on eBay and you look Sammy Hagar Capitol Records, you got to sort through all kinds of those cheap record company truck stop tapes, not the actual albums, to get to the actual albums in any format. So I thought it was I thought it was definitely important to chronicle these are his actual albums, these are the songs on them, and these are the order they were intended to be heard in. Once you get to the Geffen stuff, it gets a lot easier because those albums were accessible and easily available. I found those four albums no problem. I had a little hard time with the HSAS, but anyway. In typical fashion, Grant and I are are we go off on tangents, but I think it's important to talk about because this stuff
Mm.
is rare, but it's worth seeking out.
Mhm.
And Danger Zone's a good album. Starts off with a Lover Money, great, fast, hard rocker. He kicks right into it. A cappella opening, maybe crazy, but I ain't no fool, and they're off to the races. And also, what's significant about this song is that he's got some help on this one. He's got some lead guitar help from Neil Sean. This would be the first of many times that Sammy and Neil would collaborate. And also Steve Perry. If you listen to the background vocals, Steve Perry's on background vocals. So, and I didn't actually know that until I found this record because it's all on the credits here. Um, so yeah, Lover Money, great song. What are your thoughts on that one as an
My
opener?
thoughts on it when I listen to this, okay, see if you can hear this with me. When I hear this, it almost sounds like this could have been on that first Montrose album. The
Yeah,
guitars are heavy. It look okay. Put Ronnie Montrose on guitar. It would fit perfectly. You've got great vocals from Sammy. I think this record, when you're listening for Sammy's vocals, this is some of his best vocal work because
yeah,
he does a large sampling of things. And I think by this time in 1980, Sammy is just like a machine and honing in his craft. Yeah, maybe this isn't the best album. We might have, my favorite record, Street Machine, but a lot of people like Three Lock Box, Standing Hampton was a big seller,
yeah,
went platinum. So, but he's honing in his craft. But I think this is a great hard rocking opening track, one of my favorite Hagar tracks. And you, like you said, you got Steve Perry on it. Sounds wonderful. And Neil Schon is playing the guitar solo on here.
blistering. Yeah,
And it just hits it out of the park.
yeah,
Haven't heard this track and you don't know this record, you definitely have to hear this.
yeah.
But you listen to the band. Bill Church is right on. The band is tight. The drums sound great. And I'm going to throw me on a ledge out there, but I think this is as good as anything that's on the first Montrose album. That's just me.
It's
I think it's
it to
great.
me. It rolls along the same way that Space Station Number 5 does.
Yes.
It's fast, it's heavy, it's upbeat, and yeah. And this is a good sounding album too. Like some of Sammy's Capitol productions are hit and miss. A lot of them were produced by he and John Carter, or I think Street Machine was self-produced, and that sounded pretty good. But this one he co-produced with Jeff Workman, and Jeff Workman had been an engineer for Roy Thomas Baker, and actually I'm guessing that's how Steve Perry and Neil Sean ended up on here because Jeff Workman um, produced Departure, which
Mm-hmm.
also came out in 1980. So they're both Bay Area. Maybe I haven't looked in the credits, but I'm guessing they might have been in the studio at the same time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know, but Journey, Toto, The Cars, King Crimson. I mean, Jeff Workman basically got his start engineering on King Crimson records probably when he was a
yeah,
kid. But
and
man,
he would have engineered. He would have engineered Infinity and Evolution. So
yeah, and those are Roy Thomas Baker
and what
productions.
did Roy Thomas and so Roy Thomas Baker in 1980 produced Plus the Fashion for Alice Cooper,
Mhm.
and then so I guess Jeff he must have maybe he had a different engineer. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's a
I'm not sure when Jeff Workman broke away from when he started to do it was like in the early 80s, like 81. Well, no, he produced this. So this is one of his early records that he was
yeah,
producing. He started
yes,
producing in like 79. So I think that might be when he broke away, but it's who knows.
and that's pretty normal because a lot of producers or a lot of engineers start out as producers. I mean, that's Mike Stone. He was another engineer for Roy Thomas Baker, Bob Rock. They hone their chops and then they set it on their own. Jeff Workman doesn't have that. I don't think he has that string of hit albums the way that like Mike Stone and some of those other guys do. But
Right.
it's a good production on here. It's good, solid production. Lots of
Mhm.
bottom end. Um, Sammy's vocals are no pun intended, loud and clear, way up in the mix. And yeah, it's a really good sounding album. Next up,
And
we
the
have another song I was familiar with, 20th Century Man, and
oh,
this one is I hear a little punk in this one.
I hear
Mostly
a
in the
lot of
mostly in
things in this.
the lyrics. Lyrics are a little cynical, but I like it.
Hmm.
What are your
Um,
thoughts on this one?
my thoughts. This thing. Okay, this is a very guitar oriented album. So if you like that first Montrose album, you like Sammy Hagar with a lot of guitars, this is the record for you. And this starts off guitars blaring. Um, Kind of starts off, it reminds me of Queen, Now I'm Here, the way it starts off. And then it kind
Yep.
of morphs into like a ZZ Top type of riff. It doesn't sound like ZZ Top, but it kind of reminds me of that. So that
Yeah.
kind of gives you an idea. Uh, but to be all honest, this track really reminds me of a it's not anywhere really the same, but it kind of reminds me of Can't Drive 55. It's that type of track. But the thing is with this record, yeah, they've this band's been together for a while. You know, we're talking like their fifth album, but they still sound really inspired. And this is a rocking track. And I could compare this very similar to things that came later, like in the Geffen catalog.
Yeah.
Like I wrote in my notes, great sounding guitars, great riffs, catchy chorus. What more could you want?
Yeah.
I think it's one
This
of the best tracks on the record.
and it was co-written with Gary Peel. Like it's not most of these songs are just written by Sammy, but he co-wrote this one. So yeah, lots of guitars. But I think it's interesting. And I comment on this in the book. I it almost begs to be made into a video because I've never understood that whole middle section where he's like, "Shut the door, man! What's wrong with you?" Like it's some sort of suburban crises going on, and it's a good song. It's what I like. I think is funny about it. He says, "I don't care about 1985. So if I ain't dead, I'll be half alive." It's like, well, as we know, 1985 was a very pivotal year for Sammy. He was doing all right, and by the time he was 35, which was 1982, he was not a fat slob. So yeah, he wasn't a very good fortune teller on this one.
No.
Next up, we have the first track that I heard new when I first got this album. I'd never heard before, Miles from Boredom. This is a heavy rocker. I like this one too.
Yeah. Miles from Boredom. This is another track that when I hear it, I swear to God, I hear a lot of that first Montrose album
Yeah,
here. That's why I'm saying if you like that first Montrose album, get this record.
yeah.
Uh, but very similar sounding to Montrose. Jeff Workman's production on this, it's very dry, very upfront. Gives you like you almost feel like you're right there with Sammy in the studio.
It's a
That's how
live, yeah, it's a
very
live sounding
lively.
album.
And I don't know of how they recorded it, if they're playing live in the studio, but it does have a very live sound to it. So I like that. But yes, another great track.
Yeah,
Catchy, good chorus. Checks all my boxes, Tim.
yeah, I
Checking all
don't
my boxes.
hear I don't hear a lot of overdubs. I really don't.
Mm-mm,
Maybe some backing vocals, but yeah, it sounds like the music was recorded pretty live in the studio.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good. The next one is interesting. The next one's really interesting, and you know more about this genre than I do. But Mommy Says, Daddy Says. Would you call this power pop?
It's close.
It's
If you ever
very
heard,
happy sounding. Da, 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 da,
well,
da, da.
we all, well, maybe not everybody knows, but Rick Springfield did a cover version of I've Done Everything for
Mm-hmm.
You.
Yep.
Now that came out on Sammy's live album back in the day. He did a live version, but he did record a studio version of it.
Yep.
Now I have been trying to find information on it. I'm going to ask you about it since we're here chatting. The studio version of I've Done Everything for You by Sammy Hagar. What do you know what sessions those were from? Because
So that's a weird one, Grant, because yeah, he did record a studio version of it. It never appeared on an album until Rematch came out in '82,
Mhm,
which was, you know, obviously it's the same. It's this familiar story of an artist switches labels, starts to get
mhm,
successful, so the previous label puts out a comp, and this
mhm,
comp contained this song. And the first time I heard it was on that Red Hot cassette I was talking about, the truck stop tape, live version of it. This is 1988, and it had no information in it whatsoever. But I remember looking at the titles on the cassette and thinking, I've done everything for you. That's a pretty specific title. And I listened to it. I'm like, it's a Rick Springfield song. Like,
mhm.
what's going on? And it was years before I found out, no, Sammy wrote it. And then Rick recorded it 3 years later and had a hit with it. As
which
far
I
as the
have to,
studio version goes, yes, it's on his
yeah.
first live album, All Night Long, which came out in 78. In the UK, it came out in 79, called Loud and Clear. But there was also a standalone single that wasn't tied to any album that came out that same year, which to me kind of speaks to how Capitol didn't have a clue because he wrote them a hit single right there. That's the hit single they were after him for. Never
Mhm.
mind covering Flamingos Fly by Van Morrison. Never mind You Make Me Crazy and all the yacht rock stuff he was doing, sitting on the dock of the bay. Never mind that stuff.
Young Girl Blues.
Yeah. So Sammy just wrote them the hit single they needed to break him. And they threw it out by itself. It's exactly Grant, it's exactly what A&M did with Y&T with Summertime Girls. They didn't attach it to an album. And it I think if I had to guess,
I wonder
um,
what it had to be
it,
recorded for a.
it
It was
must have been
70.
recorded. I'm thinking it was recorded during the Red Album sessions or the musical chair sessions.
Might, because it might fit that kind of type of. I
Yeah,
think it would fit on that. It might be from that. I don't know.
yeah. Or it might have fit on Street Machine. I don't know why they didn't
I
wait
don't
and put it
know.
on Street Machine because it could have been. It's different than Rick's version. Rick's version is faster, but it's the same song and it's catchy. And
Mhm.
I know where you're going with this. This Mommy Says,
Yeah,
Daddy Says, very
that's
much in that same vein of that original version of I've Done
that's
Everything.
exactly what I wrote down. Very much in the same vein as I've done everything for you.
Like he could
I
have, Rick
listen.
Springfield could have conceivably covered this song too.
Oh yeah, it'd been perfect for Rick.
Yeah.
And but I listened to this, and this is obvious the single for the record. Now I didn't do any research to see what singles came off of this, but to me it says, well, this is like I've Done Everything for You, which is a single. This says single to me, and yeah, I'd call this power pop, not exactly power pop, but power pop adjacent. It's just like
Yeah. It's
right
on
on
the
the
heavy
edge.
side of power pop, but I mean, could you hear like could you almost hear Cheap Trick doing this?
Oh,
Because
definitely.
it's got a little bit of that humor in it. I could hear Robin Zander singing that. The
Yeah.
singles from this album um, are not the singles that I would have gone with. They put out Heartbeat, which we haven't talked about, and Run for Your Life. I would have definitely put out. I mean, maybe, but I would have
I could
definitely
see
put this out
Heartbeat.
first.
I mean, Run for Your Life's more like it starts off as a piano ballad. We'll get there, but
Yeah,
I could probably see them maybe possibly putting that out. But I would have chosen.
this
I
should
would
have
have.
been the
Mommy
first.
Says, Daddy Says
Yeah,
for
this should
sure.
have been the first single. I mean, um, and even though the albums aren't as schizophrenic as his earlier albums, they're still pretty schizophrenic because just like that, he gets really heavy within the night, which is part of the experimental part of this album, which I kind of dig. This was, this is Sammy Hagar being really ambitious, and I really, really like this one.
This is my favorite track on the record
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
I love that.
heavy.
I love when the down, 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 down. That's almost a Black Sabbath riff. Like that's heavy for
It's
him.
as heavy as Black Sabbath.
Yeah, it's really heavy. It's really doomy.
Mhm.
And it sets it up for like I'm a little surprised that there's only the two tracks on here that kind of follow this because it's in the night and then in quotations entering the danger zone. So it almost sounds like he should have continued it on side two, the way that when he gets to Three Lock Box, he ends side one within the room, and then side two opens with Rise of the Animal, and those two songs are related. He doesn't do that here,
Mm.
but it's a cool
Mm.
song. It's a really cool song.
It's almost, do you consider this a concept album? I'm not sure what the concept is, but everything's always referring to into the night, we're entering the danger zone. And that's the last track on side A. And then the danger zone's the last track on side B. Does
Yeah,
he mention danger zone and anywhere else in the lyrics on this record? I
not
don't know what the
not that
concept
comes right to
was.
my mind, but it almost sounds like he wanted to do more. Like
It sounds like it.
it sounds like at some point, and Martin and I actually did this on the Contrarians. We created a concept album about space based on Sammy Hagar songs, and a lot of his early lyrics there are references to space and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the end of side one. It ends on this heavy note and kind of ominous, and yet Side two opens with this sort of the Iceman, which is sort of it's a blues shuffle. This is another one I heard on one of those truck stop tapes. This sounds like something that would have been on one of his earlier albums.
Very soulful. You get a
Yeah,
very soulful Sammy, and nothing wrong with that. He sounds great. This track kind of goes hand in hand with the previous track because it kind of the way in the end of the night, uh, in the night, bleh, in the night ends. It kind of I can see where it would fit right in if you could segue those two together. It just kind of goes right with it. But I don't know. If we're looking at sequencing on a record, I don't think I'd start out side two with
it's a
this.
it's a strange opener, and it reminds me of something from his first couple of albums because he's got the girl backing singers. Um, it's a little lighthearted. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's a strange opener. Like you'd think he thought he would open with a heavier one, but I will say this: the production continues to be good even on this. On the drums are pounding on this. You know,
Yeah. Well, the
Chuck Ruff,
guitars, yep,
yeah,
Chuck
good,
sounds great.
yeah. Um, and next up is another song which could have been a single. I'm surprised they didn't put it out as a single. Bad Reputation. It's catchy. It's almost got that power pop adjacent thing
Mhm.
happening.
It does.
Um,
Catchy rocker, more along it kind of more along the lines of Plain Jane, I think.
yeah,
You could have put this on the FM rock radio back in the day, and I think it would have taken off.
yeah,
This could have been another single. They totally missed the boat when picking
yeah.
singles off of this.
Plain Jane was a charting song. It didn't chart very high, but I think it got to 77 on Billboard. Like it got some airplay, and it in certain regions it would have gotten a lot of airplay. This song is
That,
right in that wheelhouse. It
yeah.
actually did make a soundtrack. The little known movie, I had to look this up, but the movie was called Up the Academy. It had something to do with Mad Magazine. And this song was on A Bad Reputation is also on the soundtrack, which might have been the first time that Sammy had a song on a soundtrack. He did that a few times in the 80s. But this was also just one of his album tracks. But yeah, I the Suits at Capitol, I don't know what they were on, but I would have listened to this album and said, well, I hear two singles right off the bat. I might even have gone with Bad Reputation first, and then Mommy Says, Daddy Says. And it doesn't mean they would have hit, but they had that potential. I could hear a DJ coming on and talking over that intro. Here's the latest from Sammy Hagar, Bad Reputation. And, you know,
Yeah,
but it didn't happen.
totally. But it's catchy. It's got a great riff. It's almost kind of like in that Beatles Day Tripper type of
Yeah,
riffage or
don't,
April
don't.
Wine riffs.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, but
Yeah.
it's a perfect pop song, and I would call it, boy, it's probably even closer to power pop than the previous songs.
Yeah.
I think it's great. No
Next
issues
up,
with
we've got
that.
a uber pop song, uber pop, Heartbeat. This is one like the song Wounded in Love from his last album. This one was co-written with his then wife, Betsy. So this was credited to Sammy and Betsy Hagar. I think this song got a fair bit of airplay in the UK. And I'm also pretty sure I hear Steve Perry on that chorus again.
I think Steve's. Well, I know for a fact that Steve's on Run for Your Life. He
Yeah.
could be on there. He could be on there.
There's somebody singing that high harmony on Heartbeat. Somebody's singing that. For some reason, this song did not click with me. I don't know why. It sounds like the type of song that would, but I don't know. It's almost it's too pop, not enough power. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't want to. I don't want to say this. I guess the side one's more front loaded, top
Yeah.
loaded than this. Side two's not quite as,
Side two's a little hit and miss, but it's still pretty good. But
but
yeah,
it's
this
still
one just
good.
doesn't. This one just did not click for me. But
Yeah, it's fine. But I like Wounded in Love better. If we're comparing, contrasting with Street Machine,
and the only song on here that's a cover is "Run for Your Life," and this song was originally recorded. I want to say it was a band. Without looking, I want to say it was a band called Runner, who had one album on Island Records. And so this is sort of it starts out as a ballad, it kind of kicks in a little bit, but it's mid-tempo. But this song was actually produced by Tom Scholz. which is interesting. And apparently, Tom Scholz was going to produce the entire album. But if I had to
Yeah.
make a guess why Sammy didn't do that, is because he wanted to get the album out. And Tom,
No, I think was it Epic knew that he was going to produce it, and they went,
oh,
well, we need a Boston
we needed a
record.
Boston out. Yeah,
We don't want you spending time over there working with Sammy Hagar.
yeah.
We need a Boston record. I think they pulled him off. Maybe
Oh,
someone
well,
in the
that makes sense
comments
too. But I
could
mean,
weigh
given
in on
Tom
that, but
Scholz's, procrastination or how long he takes for Boston albums, probably anything he would have produced would have taken years. And Sammy's like, I got to get a record out, you know. So,
but
but
it
it's
fits
good.
right
I
in.
like this one. It doesn't. This one doesn't strike me
Yeah,
as one of his off the wall covers that he would do that doesn't make any sense. This sounds like something he would have written.
it fits right in with the rest of the record
Yeah.
because this record, if you're looking at this as an album, this sounds to me more like a collection of songs than
Yep.
as opposed to a record because there's a lot of different styles on it. Some people can pull that off. Not everybody can pull it off. I think as an album, probably Street Machine works better I think it's got better material, but
I do too, and I think the public at large kind of agreed it did chart a little bit higher. Street Machine was his highest charting album
yeah.
through that period.
But I think what at least Tom does with the production on here, I don't have any problem with.
Oh, it's good sound. It's good sounding, and I
It
don't hear
must
a
have
big,
been,
I don't hear a pronounced difference in overall
no,
sound than the rest
it
of the
must
record.
have been one of the early things that they started to work on before he got pulled.
Yeah.
And it just seems like it's be an odd choice to do a song from a band that no one's ever heard about. I don't know. Maybe it was Tom's choice. Hey, Sammy, you'd sound great singing this. I don't know, but it's
Well,
fine. It's okay.
yeah, because Boston has done that, because they did that with what's it called, To Be a Man on Third Stage. That was kind of and Magdalene on Walk On. So Tom might have had his ear to the ground and says, I can hear us doing something cool with this song. I've never listened to the original. I probably should.
Yeah,
And
I've never
then
heard it.
to me, the album kind of sounds unfinished at the end because you get the song The Danger Zone, which is a 40-second acoustic piece, which should have come after In the Night because it's like, leave a message with my clone. I've just passed through the danger zone. And that's it. It almost sounded like he wanted to do more, but Capitol said, no, the record's done, get out.
Yeah, it's only 41 seconds. And
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the Danger Zone track, but 41 seconds wasn't long enough for me. I'd
Yeah.
like to have,
It sounded like there was more planned for it, but
yeah,
it never happened.
I don't, it's just a very odd way to end the record.
Yeah. And that ended the record. That was the end of Sammy's Capitol contract, which he'd worked hard for them, put out a lot of albums in a short amount of time and very little to show for it. A couple of songs that hit the Hot 100. I think Street Machine peaked at 71 on Billboard, and this one peaked at 85. He was selling albums, and obviously he was a big enough artist in some markets, like you saw,
Yeah.
to be able to headline, but it wasn't all over the country. Like in the East Coast, he couldn't get arrested. And I don't think he ever came up to Canada during those years. You
I
know,
don't know.
it's an interesting way to end that contract because I think he ends it strong, but I don't think it would have mattered what he did for Capitol. They weren't going to, you know, I kind of wonder if he'd have delivered the Standing Hampton record to them, would they have made Piece of My Heart the first single and not I'll Fall in Love Again? Or, would they have gone with something offbeat like Sweet Hitchhiker or you know what I mean? Like, would they know what to do? Would they,
I'm not
I don't think
sure.
they
I
had
think,
that savvy, like the John David Kolodner A&R expertise that, I mean, what a difference a year makes. He signs to Geffen Records. All of a sudden he's a gold and platinum selling artist.
well, I think everything came together there,
Yeah.
obviously. But here, fifth album, Sammy hasn't done anything yet. Uh, I don't hear this as a contractual album. I think there's a
No, this
decent
just sounds like
stuff
the next
here.
album he would have made.
Yeah, it's not like he's not trying or just saying, "Oh, here, Capital, here's a
Yeah.
record. I'm
There's
running
a
to
bunch of
Geffen."
outtakes. Yeah.
It doesn't appear to be that, but the length of this record's only 35 minutes. Why couldn't you at least finish the record? I don't know. Maybe they've ran out of time. I don't know. But Danger Zone, I think, needs to be completed, or this record could be resequenced to make it into a stronger record. Uh, I, it almost just sounds like, even not on Sammy's end, but maybe on the production end, it just looks like it's unfinished. I just think it's unfinished.
Yeah, yeah, it's strange sequencing on side two. I think side one just about right.
Just
Uh,
about right.
maybe they should have opened side two within the night and like bookended side two. Maybe that would have made more sense. And side one with Iceman. I don't know, but
I think that
as
would have made more sense.
as it stands, it's a fine album. You know, it's not like his songwriting changed wholesale between this album and Standing Hampton. I think he did get more of a pop sensibility, but only just. It almost sounds like it just would have been a natural progression for him because he already proved that he could write pop rock songs that worked, that could have gotten across to radio listeners. It's just that he was on a label that didn't promote him correctly, and his manager got him out of his contract. My understanding was that they had to go to court over it, and basically John Kolodner, Sammy claims that he was the third ever artist signed to Geffen Records after John Lennon and Donna Summer. And I can't think of any albums coming out before that.
You're
So,
talking, this came out in 82.
well, it came out, yeah, it was Standing Hampton's, it's says 81, but I think it came out January 82. But
I
I
thought
think that
Quarter
Sammy was
Flash
the third
was,
artist signed to Geffen.
I thought Quarter Flash was the first.
Quarter Flat, it might have come out before Standing Hampton, but I just don't know the order. But it would make sense that he was one of their first signings, and then he didn't sell multi-millions for Geffen, but he could be counted on for gold and platinum uh, through most of the 80s. But my point is, I don't think he changed all that much from the writing style he was already doing. I think he was just getting better at it. That's why this album is better than his earlier albums. I don't know if it was better than Street Machine. Street Machine was probably his peak on the Capitol label.
I agree.
But this is a fine follow-up. I mean, if we look at it in April Wine comparison, if Street Machine was Nature of the Beast, Danger Zone's Power Play is still a pretty good album. So,
Oh, wow.
but then that's a whole other
I
story.
love Power Play.
Yeah.
Quarter Flash signed to Geffen in September of 81.
Okay.
It's all around there, but I know that they were one of the first bands that got signed.
Yeah. And then shortly after them would have been Asia, and and then Geffen became one of the biggest labels. But yeah, Capitol Records just could not break Sammy Hagar. And I don't know. Like I sometimes wonder what would have happened if, because he came out of Montrose, what would have happened if he signed to Warner Brothers?
If he would have stayed with Ted Templeman and went with Warner Brothers, I think it might have been a little bit different.
Yeah. But I mean, we're looking back now. We're armchair quarterback.
Yeah, but I think Keith Olsen knew exactly what to do with
Keith
Sammy.
Olsen was the perfect producer for those first couple of albums, and then he did reunite with Ted Templeman for VOA.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story. All of which I did my best to document in this Red on Black Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar. I'll have the link below. Grant, thank you for sitting in on this deep dive on Danger Zone. Folks, don't forget to check out Grant's Rock Warehouse. Always great content. The Contrarians. We have a lot of fun on Contrarian. We've been doing a lot of fun Wednesday night album cover episodes. Everybody likes the album cover episodes, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
We had fun. The last one was a blast.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, folks, for watching. And of course, we're going to keep on going. So next up, we've got Standing Hampton. Stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for more content on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We'll see you later.